The FBI has carried out a raid at Georgia's Fulton County election office, seizing materials related to ballots from President Trump's 2020 election loss. Democratic lawmakers and voting rights groups are condemning the FBI's raid of Georgia's election office, calling the move a serious threat to election integrity.
Couldn't agree more. It is a very serious threat to election integrity. This goes way beyond Trump's obsession with 2020 and, his continuing big lie that he really won that election, despite the findings of his own Justice Department, his own cybersecurity operation. Election officials in every state, most of them Republican, about 60 lawsuits, all of which Trump lost. He can't let go of 2020. But it goes way beyond his ego-driven obsession. The really frightening thing here is that they're going to gin something up, that's going to be hard to refute. It's from 6 years ago about irregularities, fraud, rigged elections in 2020, which is going to give them an excuse to crack down on the 2026 elections, the midterms, and not to make sure they're fair, but just the opposite, to rig them in some way in favor of Donald Trump's Republican Party. There is independent evidence of this. Pam Bondi wrote a letter to officials in Minnesota and said, we can dampen down on our immigration enforcement.
You're right.
If you do one thing for us. And what was that? What did she demand? Not that they round up immigrants on their own, right?
Voter rolls.
Voter rolls. What do voter rolls have to do with immigration enforcement, Sam?
Not a lot.
How about nothing? This just shows what their real motivation in all of these actions are. They want to get a handle that is going to enable them in some way to spike the fairness of the 2026 election. There is no other explanation for trying to tie immigration enforcement to the provision of voter rolls. The two have about as much in common as the moon does with green cheese. Nothing to do with one another. So here we get, this attempt to extort, and it's nothing more than extortion, voter rolls from Minnesota, and then we have this FBI search of voting records.
No, it wasn't just a search; it was a raid. They
search and seizure.
Yeah,
right?
They took the stuff.
What, 700 pallets of ballots?
I saw some county officials saying that a few days ago, everybody knew where the ballots were. They were secure in the Fulton County offices. Now, he said that he doesn't know where they are. He doesn't know who has them, etc.
And what does Tulsi Gabbard have to do with this? She's supposed to be keeping us safe from domestic internal terror, from foreign threats, from foreign hacking into our infrastructure and our politics. What in the world is she doing? Spending her time going through an election from 6 years ago that was more thoroughly investigated and litigated than any election in U.S. history, including the disputed election of 2000, which focused on just one state.
Her being there is such a red flag.
It is a complete red flag and shows, just what the nefarious motivations are here. Moreover, Georgia has always been a particular focus of Donald Trump and his allies. And particularly, they have focused on Fulton County, Sam, which is not only Democratic, but what's its demography? Black and minority. They always zero in on areas that are black and minority, whether it's Fulton County, where Atlanta is, Detroit, Philadelphia. Those are the areas where they claim voter fraud is taking place. And this is not occurring in a vacuum either. When it really mattered, and we had a chance to prove something, Trump made extensive fraud claims about voter fraud in Georgia, both in public statements and in filings under oath. He did so. And I know about this because I researched this for a case I was involved in as an expert witness in Georgia. He kept making these false statements even after his attorney, John Eastman, informed him that the claims were not accurate. U.S. District Court Judge David Carter, who presided over litigation on the release of Eastman's emails, found that emails show, quote, that President Trump knew that the specific numbers of voter fraud were wrong, but continued to tout those numbers both in court and to the public, unquote. It's a federal judge saying that the evidence showed that Donald Trump knew what he was saying was false, but continued to perpetrate these false claims. None of the charges about voter fraud in Georgia gained any traction whatsoever in state or federal court, and they were refuted by the Republican administration in Georgia. Georgia's not Maryland, Sam. It's run by Republicans, by conservative Republicans. And it was his claims were thoroughly refuted by Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and by the Republican Deputy Secretary of State Gabriel Sterling. Moreover, the lies about the 2020 election were directly delivered to the state legislature of Georgia by guess who, Sam? Trump's good buddy, his personal attorney?
Rudy Giuliani.
You got it exactly right. He reiterated the lies to the legislature of Georgia to try to get them to overturn the free and fair election. He and associates that he brought with him presented lurid, utterly debunked, ridiculous charges, including China sending ballots to the United States, technology being used from the long-dead Venezuela president Hugo Chavez, flipping votes from Trump to Biden, Italian satellites manipulating the votes.
Now, you know what's interesting about that is, obviously, I said earlier, Tulsi Gabbard being involved in this is a major red flag just because who she is, but being in the DNI and mostly working in foreign intelligence, a lot of people are assuming that her involvement means that the Trump administration is going to say, or already said to a judge who gave them this court order to raid the offices, that there's some sort of, they're going to claim that there's some sort of foreign interference going on here.
Those theories were totally debunked 5 and 6 years ago. So I don't know where they found a judge.
That's what I was about to ask, is how did they, if it's so nonsensical, they had to present some sort of evidence to this judge. What evidence did they provide to this judge? And I know you can judge shop, blah, 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 but these theories are so out there. It makes me pause and think, what the hell did they present to this judge, and how did this judge approve this?
Apparently it was a magistrate judge, not a full judge. There are hundreds of judges. You know, you could probably find a judge to agree to almost anything. Look what Aileen Cannon did, you know, overturning almost 170 years of precedent, 150 years or so, saying, you know, the special counsel was illegally appointed and we have to dismiss the case and we can't reveal any information about it. Who would have thought any judge would go there? And the other thing that's so telling, Sam, is apparently the U.S. attorney who got this search warrant is not from Georgia. It's from Missouri.
Crazy.
Not only were they judge shopping, apparently, I can't prove that, but it seems like they're U.S. attorney shopping.
That's insane.
It's the same thing, you know, with the indictments against Comey. They couldn't get the regular, you know, experienced U.S. attorney to sign off on it. So they brought in this totally unqualified person who had been an insurance lawyer, never prosecuted a case.
Right.
Lindsay Halligan. and illegally made her a U.S. attorney, and the judge, of course, threw that out. Moreover, Giuliani claimed that two African American, of course, poll workers were passing around a thumb drive with votes on it. And, of course, Giuliani played on the horrific stereotypes of black people, saying they were passing it around like they were vials of heroin. Of course, yes, he actually said that. Of course, what they were passing around was a mint. No, they weren't, passing around thumb drives with votes on them. Not only this, Giuliani's lies were so thoroughly debunked that he had to admit he was disbarred, in part based upon all these lies he told about Georgia, and the two African-American poll workers sued him and got a $143 million judgment for his outrageous defamatory lies.
Let's talk about what's happening now, because I think we've all heard this many, many times. I don't really want to go back and relitigate the 2020 election.
It's very important we do, because
okay. I feel like most people
we've got to show all of this is based on outrageous lies, and people don't necessarily know exactly what Giuliani was telling the Georgia state legislature.
Okay,
and why it was so outrageous.
You can continue, but I do feel like we've heard this many, many, many times. My question for you is what's happening now, and especially with, if you look at the series of events, right? Trump gives this Davos speech where he says, essentially, the 2020 election is stolen and people are going to start being prosecuted. Then we get the Pam Bondi extortion, and now we have the Fulton County raid. Now, before all of that, there's an important part that some people have brought up. The president of Venezuela, which the Trump administration and Trump himself had tried to tie to 2020 election fraud, is now here in America in an American prison. Is that sketchy to you?
The whole thing,
given the timeline and the context of all this.
And, they have tremendous leverage on Maduro, right? Because he is in custody. His future depends upon what the Trump administration decides to do. So, yes, one of the things we try to do on this show is not just give historical perspective, which I've just done. And I've got to just give you one more thing about the history. One more sentence. This is the Deputy Secretary of State, Sterling, a staunch Republican, who said, quote, "I will go to my grave knowing that Rudy Giuliani looked the state senators in the eye and just flat out lied." This is, as far as the basis that they're using, to recreate all of these claims about a rigged election, particularly in Georgia. But you're right, Sam. You got to put it all together. This FBI raid is not in isolation. It has to be looked at in conjunction with the three other episodes that you've talked about. The Bondi extortion, Trump's claims of prosecution, and having the former head of state of Venezuela in custody. What this matters for the moment is it looks like all of this is part of an effort to cook up a batch of new lies about election fraud, which enable them to interfere with the integrity of the 2026 midterms, just as they interfered with the integrity of the 2020 results, setting up slates of false electors, pressuring election officials to change the results, inciting the mob to try to interfere with the counting of the vote on January 6th. They've done it before, but this time it's much more insidious because they're doing it well in advance of the election, not as a catch-up play after they already lost.
It's really sketchy, scary stuff.
Thanks for watching our video, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and become a member today.